How you doing? So I just got done. I have been playing with an expansion chamber saw build with alcohol. It's a project we've already kind of crossed into that, and I'm still working on it. I'm going to show you the way she's running right here today. We've made progress. So I think she's actually nearing completion. It's very close. It's just, if you watched the earlier videos of this saw, there was what I was hoping would happen, but then there's reality of what actually happened. You know what I mean? So I was hoping here in his hand, but what actually happened, you know what I mean? You can wish in one hand, you know? So that's kind of what we're looking at here. So I think we're going to go over this, and we're going to go over some of these details. I want to explain what I'm finding, and if you guys get into any of these types of projects, it might influence some of your decision making on the way you build it, because I've learned some stuff. It is a running expansion chamber alcohol saw at this point. So the last time you saw the build was when we first converted it to alcohol, and she was running lean and all that stuff. So today we're actually a much closer to a finished product. Okay, so just to kind of bring you up there. Now, do we want to start with the cuts? Yeah, we'll go ahead. I want to throw a couple of cuts in here and show you how she's currently running. This is on alcohol. It does have the expansion chamber and all that stuff. It's just, the thing is loud, and the microphone on the camera has been freaking out on me over the volume. So if the sound goes wonky on you, it's just because it's so loud. It gets all like distorted sounding and everything. So I tried to pull the camera away from it a little further, and then I'm going to zoom in. Hopefully that helped, but I doubt it did. We'll see. But if it sounds wonky, that's what's going on. The camera is just, it just can't handle the volume of the saw, really. So we'll go ahead. I'll show you a couple of cuts. We're going to get more detail here. I'm actually going to be making another video on this exact same saw, probably one of the next couple of videos you're going to see, and that's me running it on gas with this setup versus alcohol in this setup. So you're going to get to see both of those versions. That'll be coming up soon. But today is more about bringing you up to speed on where we're currently sitting. So let me show you a couple of cuts here right now. Alrighty, so that is how she is currently running. We were hoping for more RPM than that, or at least I was. I was hoping for more RPM out of the build, and I learned some things out of the process, or during the whole process, that I don't know if I'm correct on my findings. Then maybe there's somebody out there who has more experience with this, you know what I mean? So when we were running it originally with gas and just a normal muffler that's pretty wide open, we were able to get 12,660 in the cut. That was in the cut. Now, it didn't have enough torque to really dog on it hard and any of that stuff, but it was pulling 12,660. In fact, let me get a dyno sheet here. It's not the dyno run of this saw, but it's going to help me to explain what I'm finding in the way this saw is performing. So let me get a dyno sheet. You'll see what I'm talking about. All right, this is a dyno of a different build, and we're going to kind of go over this, and I'm going to use this to kind of explain what we got, what I'm finding, what I think I'm finding here. All right, so this saw probably performs really close. Like, these both perform probably pretty close in gas form, so that's kind of why I chose this one. But you see here at the 12.8, we were finding we were cutting at about 12,660, which right about here on the RPM spectrum, and here it is on the torque, okay? This is the torque line, this is the RPM. And that's where we were making the cut. And I'm finding a lot of my gas builds that are on mufflers, I'm actually cutting somewhere in this region of the graph versus this is where the peak power is occurring, is up here, okay? We're making our cuts here, but peak power is down, closer to like this one here is at like 11.2, maybe 11,000 RPM, all right? So what I found here with this build is that even though I was able to cut at 660, with the expansion chamber and everything, even by switching it to alcohol and stuff, it changed, okay? So, and it actually lowered. So instead of up here at 12,660, we are down here closer to like 12,000, which is closer to where the peak power is. And I think what I got going on is the expansion chamber is helping to make the saw run at peak power. So wherever in the RPM spectrum we find peak power, the expansion chamber is going to focus on that point, not where we want it to be. So we would like this to actually hit closer to like 13,000 or so, like up here. That'd be awesome, right? But what I'm finding is with the expansion chamber, it's actually focusing all the power down here closer to where the peak power is, which kind of makes sense because that in the porting of the build, this is showing us where the peak power is happening. You know what I mean? Where in the RPM range it is, But that's kind of what I'm finding with the expansion chamber. We wish it would happen up here at 13 or 14, but it's like, it's not some magic thing, It doesn't just magically stretch your RPM up. It just uses whatever port timing you have and everything and focus it more on the peak power. So you're not stretching your RPM up, you're stretching, you're moving into your peak power and increasing it. You're basically increasing your peak power hill here. You're not really stretching out your RPM. So your peak power here, this little mountain, it just got bigger and opens up a little bit further. So we moved it up probably closer to like that by putting the expansion chamber on. And the alcohol seems to affect the torque more and get your torque stretched out a little higher in the RPM range. So by adding the expansion chamber and the alcohol both. So expansion chamber, just running it on gas, on expansion chamber and everything, stretched her out a little higher, and then the alcohol stretched her out a little higher in the RPM range. You know what I mean? But it didn't like drastically change it to some really high RPM that we'd like to be at. Now, if you stuck around this far in the video, I actually have more clips for you. So I'm going to show you some more clips, additional clips to what you just seen. And I might even repeat some of the stuff you just, in fact, I'll probably just show you everything. So I think I showed you one or two cuts. And then I think now I'm going to go ahead and we're focused on showing you more of the cutting. And because there's actually more. I went into a bigger piece of wood, the whole 9 yards. So if you're not familiar with this project, it's a Holtzforma 372 with a big bore top M that we ported it, converted it to alcohol now, and put the expansion chamber on it. but the focus was to get this thing to run with a 10-pin sprocket. All right. It is on a 10-pin, so everything you just seen is with it pulling a 10-pin sprocket. If you ever see this bar being used, this is a 10-pin bar that I modified it for a 10-pin setup. So this is a 10-pin bar. Now it is a square chain, and this saw makes this chain feel dull. So I think I need to get a little deeper on the raker. The raker on this chain is not that deep. It's still a factory setting, actually. So this is the second sharpening on the chain. I had ground the chain once before, and then I converted it to a square chain, and I still haven't adjusted the raker. So I think the raker's a little high, and I'm definitely gonna have to do something to increase the self-feed, I think, a touch. It's not going to be much of an adjustment whenever I sharpen this thing, though. It's basically going to be what you just saw with just a small modification. If you've seen my previous video about my square chain and all that stuff being fast or whatever, this is it. This is the same sharpening, the exact same setup on this chain. It's just this saw makes it feel dull. It does. But here's the thing, though. This chain is so freaking smooth cutting, and that's one of the issues I ran into during this project. So, remember how I just told you it was originally a round chain? I ran that chain on this saw first, and it had a little bit of chatter in it before. I've ran it on other saws, you know, it had just a tiny touch of chatter, no big deal, right? Well, when you go to a 10-pin and alcohol and all that stuff, not a good idea. It was a little scary to run it. The little bit of chatter turned into a whole freaking buttload of chatter. So I had to take the chain off. I sharpened it up with a square, and it smoothed it right out. This thing feels like a freaking butter knife. Yeah, the hot knife through butter, that's what it feels like. There is zero chatter on it. In fact, if it wasn't going through the wood, you'd hardly even be able to tell it was going through the wood. Now, it does not have squat for self-feed, though. So I'm having to like push it through the wood. Now, you guys who are familiar with square chain sharpening and the side plate angle and how that affects, you know, your self-feed, I'm running it at 10 degrees right now. So, you know, yeah, okay. It doesn't really have any self-feed. Now, probably gonna have to make a little tweak there. I think I might go a little deeper on the raker, though. I think I'm going to change that 10 and bump it up to like 12, maybe 13 degrees. Make a test hit, see if I like it. As long as it's still really smooth, I might go ahead and take a touch off the rakers. So I'm using a Husqvarna raker gauge, and I have it on the hardwood setting, which is typically about 25 thou. Probably going to have to adjust that down to about 30 or so, at least with this saw. The chain is just not capable of slowing it down. And that's with a 10-pin. Remember, this is a 10-pin sprocket. You've seen a lot of testing out there on other channels and stuff, I'm sure, with, you know, going from a 7 to an 8-pin. We are sitting on a 10-pin right now. But the thing that kind of, I don't know, I almost felt like I was disappointed and stuff, and I've been fighting with, is she's running at about 12,180 RPM. Exactly. It doesn't matter. It's what I'm doing. 12,180 RPM is exactly what this thing's going to pull. This expansion chamber is hitting with the saw at exactly that RPM. And I can push it. I can try to push it through the cut and make it just grunts through it and maintains that RPM. If I try to let it, you know, self-feed through the cut or whatever, that's the RPM. No matter what, it's going through the wood at 12,180 RPM. Free rev isn't a whole lot much more than that, really. It's free revving right around 13,000. And I think what's going on is this expansion chamber really, like by focusing where the peak power is going to be in the RPM range and everything, that it's kind of, it affects it on the free rev the whole 9 yards. I think that's what we're seeing here. Now, I've been thinking about pulling this expansion chamber off and seeing if I could redo something and try to get the RPM stretched a little higher. I've been thinking about it, but I don't know. I kind of like the way this all runs. I don't think it's going to win any races though. Now here's the thing I could do though. I didn't pull the clutch cover off and start measuring yet, but I'm considering purchasing like an 11 or 12 pin sprocket. I would have to put together a whole other bar for it as well. Will this thing pull a 12 pin? I'm considering going down that path. They're expensive, but they do exist. It's just, I don't know if it's going to fit in that clutch cover saw. You know what I mean? So the 10 pin fits, it runs, it pulls it just fine. It's just, I don't know. I'm thinking we might want to consider going bigger on the sprocket. Maybe take just a touch more off the rakers, see how that does, then go bigger sprocket from this point. It seems like the expansion chamber, like the addition of the expansion chamber, causes you to focus on a very specific RPM, which is going to be hard for me to compete against a nitromethane build. In fact, that's why I don't think this thing will ever be a winner at a race. A nitromethane saw, they are built to wind out at extremely high RPMs, 15 grand through the wood. I mean, they'll free rev closer to like 18 or 19 grand and then go through the wood at like 15 on nitromethane. So the question is, will my 10 pin alcohol setup be able to keep up with like a 7 pin nitromethane build or an 8 pin nitromethane build? You know what I mean? What if I take it to a 12 pin? Will it be able to keep up? I don't know. I honestly don't know. But one of the things that makes me think that I don't stand a chance in trying to compete against those guys is that the saw is much bigger, it's bulkier, and trying to get off the start and everything. I mean, I got to start the saw, get it to the wood, make 3 cuts, that whole 9 yards here. And I think the nitromethane guys are going to have the advantage because they don't have that big expansion chamber, you know what I mean? Now, if there was a race in which we were cutting 24, 28, 30 inches of wood, that's where I think this saw is going to shine. The bigger wood. And I don't typically see those races unless you go out west. Here on our side, it's common to see 8x8 cutting. You're cutting on an 8x8 piece of wood, and I only ever get to see the big wood racing on the West Coast. And I think that's the kind of build we got here. I think this thing with like a 24 or 28 inch bar on this exact setup would be really fast on a piece of hardwood. I mean, you just saw it cut about almost, that piece of wood is just shy of 24 inches. Probably closer to like 22. So 22 inches of wood is what you just saw that thing go through on a 10 pin. So, expansion chambers, are they good for racing? I think for this style build, this alcohol with expansion chamber. Me personally, this is my favorite way to go. This is my favorite. I'm a dirt bike guy, 4-wheelers. I mean, I drag raced a freaking Banshee. You know, this is me. This is kind of reminds me of those days of the drag strips, running the alcohol in the Banshee with an expansion, you know what I mean, the twin expansion chambers. You know what I mean? That's what this brings me back to those days, you know. But as far as a full-blown 5-cube race build, I think to be competitive and in that world and stuff, I think nitromethane would be the way to go. And build it to really wind out the RPM and rely on that nitromethane for the torque. You know what I mean? I think the expansion chamber just, I don't know. I don't know if it's going to be able to keep up. We'll try it though. I mean, I got a race I'm taking that saw to. I'm planning on taking that saw to a race here in the end of July. So we'll see how it does. May not come in last because somebody's saw might fail. You know what I mean? they might lean out in the cut and not make a complete 3 cut. So I'm pretty sure I'll beat those guys. I don't seem to be having any trouble with that. You know, but it'll be kind of curious to see where she places, you know. But look now leaning forward to this, I have that Partner 5000. I was thinking about doing this exact same thing too. I want to see if I can actually get that to nitromethane. I think that maybe. See, now I'm starting to change my mind because I got that 350 and I'm putting a 346 top end on. That'd be a good candidate for a nitromethane build and not have to screw with my really, really nice looking. I mean, that freaking Partner 5000 looks almost brand new. You know what I mean? It has very low hours on it. Maybe I'll just take the night. You know what? I think I'll do that. I'll take that Partner 5000, put it on alcohol, but I don't think I'm going to take it to nitromethane. Alcohol is a much safer way to go. Nitromethane is when you're going to start seeing your failures. So how about we do that? We just take it to methanol and not play with the nitromethane on that build. We'll look at that 350, put a 346 top end on it and stuff, and maybe build a nitromethane build out of it for the 3 cube, you know. But for now, heck, I don't care if I take that Partner 5000 as it sits and run against nitromethane guys. I don't. It's, you know, I'm showing up for the fun of it, really. So, heck, I don't even have all my saws built. So, if I don't have everything built, I'm just going to run a smaller saw in a bigger class, you know. But anyway, that's how that 372 is running. I keep rambling on here, and I learned a lesson here. I actually lost, almost 500 RPM till I was done, till at the end of the project. I lost 500, but I went up to a 10 pin. So the question is, does a loss of 500 RPM and increasing to a 10 pin, does that make the saw faster or not? You know what I mean? That's what we should do. We need to do the math to figure out if, you know, the gas build at 12,660 is faster, pulls more chain through the wood or whatever, than what running at 12,180 does on a 10 pin. Need to do that figure. You know what I mean? Which way's faster? This feels faster. I think I just need to tweak the sprocket and chain setup a little better, because I'm having to freaking do a handstand on this saw to push it through the wood as well as it's going, you know? So we'll see how she progresses, but that's the way she's running. Expect another video. I'm going to do a video showing you how it ran on gas and then on the nitromethane, because during the build process, I went to alcohol. I was curious to see if alcohol was holding me back, because I was trying to gain more RPM than that. So I took it back to gas to see, and it changed, but not the way you know, it changed. To be expected, it changed because I went from alcohol to gas, but I ended up taking it back to alcohol for a reason. So, and we're gonna show that in a video here coming up soon. So I hope you enjoyed this little rant. That's how the saw is currently running. It's well past dark right now, so anything else? I mean, we still got some tweaks to do. I got to change out the starter handle. I need one of the bigger loopy ones. Need to get one of them on there. I still got to figure out trigger lock, which is probably going to be a zip tie. And the air filter during the race will come off. There won't be an air filter because it'll be in my way. I'll probably smack the freaking thing. So I'll pull the air filter off to make my 3 cuts at a race, but for all testing and running otherwise, it will have an air filter on it. So, oh, and I still got to gut the clutch cover. The chain brake is still intact. I need to get all of that ripped out of there. So I don't want to lose those parts. It'll be nice to save those parts in case a 372 breaks a chain brake, you know what I mean? So I still got to do that. I had to pull it off because the flag was getting in the way of the expansion chamber. So I had to pull at least the flag part off. But there will be more on this saw in the future. That's how she's currently running. And yeah, not what I was expecting. I was expecting to stretch the RPM out a little higher than that. I wasn't expecting to lose 500. But she worked out the way she worked out. I let the saw tell me what it wanted, and I just kind of followed the path of what it was telling me to do, and not what I was hoping would happen. You know what I mean? And that's kind of where we ended up. There you go. That's how she is. Later.